Hello and thanks for joining me for some more landscape photography. In this video I'm not going too far afield, but before that let's just catch up with one image that I've made since my last video that you may not have seen if you don't follow me on social media. It's an image that I do take quite a lot with the marram grass and the beach down at Aberfrau, but what caught my eye on this particular occasion was the colour of the sky. Usually you get those nice early morning magenta tones, but I thought it worked really well where it's sort of contrasting with the colour of the sea but also emulating the colour of the marram grass. Now it's a Saturday afternoon and I've got a few hours to myself and I really want to get out and about with my camera. I've had a look out the window and the mountains aren't looking that inspiring today, and I've been on the coast quite a lot recently. So what I thought I'd do is take you down to the rather nice water feature that I've got just in front of the house, and I haven't actually taken you there for probably a couple of years, I don't think, although I spend a lot of time there myself, and it is a really good time of year for this sort of subject matter. So I'm going to grab my kit and take you down to the lake. These sort of conditions are pretty unusual for around here because we're on the southwest coast of the island. The beach is just beyond that strip of land over there, so we've usually got a southwesterly blowing into our faces. But I really like this time of year around the lake, and whilst there's not much in the way of colour, we've got these really nice textures from last year's growth that hasn't yet died away. Probably head about halfway round. But what I really wanted to do with this video is to perhaps show that there's still some photography to be had, even if you're not as lucky as me with fabulous coastline and mountain scenery on my doorstep. Most people will have a body of water of some sort not too far away from home. And most bodies of water around the margins do present one or two opportunities for landscape photography. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to at least give you some degree of inspiration based on what I might get today. And even though the conditions are flat grey, choosing to come here was sort of strategic, because had I gone into the mountains, mountain photography tends to be more long range, and so if there's not much going on in the sky, or if, as on my recent video, the cloud base is obscuring your targets, it can make it quite difficult. So it's sort of a consolation prize, I suppose. The sort of thing that's worth looking for is something like this little feature, this line of rocks, which isn't in a nice straight line by accident. It's probably the footings of an old dry stone wall because it extends up into the field here. This is a midwinter shot for me because sunset is directly across the lake. Get nice and low down to reduce the size of the body of water in your midground, and it's quite an interesting image. But it's not one for today. But there's a lesson to be drawn from this, in that it's always worth scouting around your local body of water, because you may not have an image today, but you can file it away for another more opportune moment. So I'm about a third of the way around the lake so far, and I've drawn a blank on the landscape. So I put my 40-150 f2.8 Pro along with the 2x teleconverter. I saw about a dozen cormorants, and I'm really keen to get a good image of one of them drying its wings, and they saw me coming. They're very skittish. I couldn't get anywhere near them. So the only thing I've managed with this so far is a particularly unflattering image of a swan. But this little rock just down here is something that I've had a go at in the past when I'm doing my routine walks around the lake for fishery purposes. So since I've got all my gear with me, I thought, yeah, let's have a proper go at it and see if I can make something of it. I've heard it said by quite a few landscape photographers that in the modern age of in-body stabilization, you don't really need a tripod anymore. Well, I've tried to make this image several times in the past. This little lone boulder surrounded by this lovely framing of last year's bankside bulrushes and dead grasses and all that sort of thing. I walk around the lake reasonably regularly, and of course I've always got my camera with me, so handheld I've tried to get down this low and frame it up just right, and every single time I haven't managed to pull it off, which has been a bit upsetting because there have been occasions when the light was a lot more interesting. I'm kind of glad that the composition hasn't changed much. This little bit of reeds that's lying flat is as a result of high water during winter. And you can't really emulate it with doing a bit of gardening. Now, I have actually got rid of a couple of loose bits of reed that were just floating on the water in front because they were horribly distracting and would have completely ruined the shot. But this little framing device that I've got here is completely natural. And I thought, yeah, today would be a good day to have another go at it. I'm shooting it with my 17mm f1.8 prime because that's a perfect lens for this sort of shot. I'm shooting at f2, didn't need it to be wide open specifically. And you know, the general rule of thumb is to stop down by about 1 stop, but these lenses are so sharp that a third of a stop just make sure that it's as sharp as it can be. But what I really wanted to do with this is to retain a very shallow depth of field. I really only want the rock to be sharp. This is all dropped off into soft focus in the foreground, and also over the far side where the land runs along the other side of the lake. I didn't want that to be sharp either. I'm over at the far side of the lake now. My house is sort of directly opposite me. This is the area where the fishermen keep their boats, although it's more of a graveyard if I'm honest. This little channel through the bulrushes is where they launch the boats in the summer, and I love it at this time of the year because you've got the seed heads usually still intact through the winter. As soon as the new summer growth comes on, they'll all be gone. But it does give me a really nice foreground, and I'm liking this T-shape leading over to the far side of the lake, where there's a little white cottage just nestling in the side of a hill that sits right in the center of it. So obviously lends itself to portrait orientation. Quite a straightforward shot. I'm using my 45mm f1.8 on this one, although I have got it stopped down to f8 because I really like the textures in the foreground, but I don't want the background to drop off because I think the background with the reflections as well is quite interesting. One thing you actually don't hear landscape photographers talk about very much is using the depth of field preview, and I use it all the time because if you focus and just look at your live view or through your EVF, unless you actually use the stop down button, you're not getting a true representation of what your depth of field will be. So my foreground without that is actually quite blurred, and when I stop it down to check, I can see that actually it's sharp. I'm not sure if there's anything else to be had today. I'm going to kind of head back round. It's quite late in the afternoon now, so it's getting quite dark, but you never know, there might be some more, so we'll have a look on the way back. As I was heading back round the lake, I thought I'd have another go at this old jetty. It used to be quite a substantial structure, but all that's left now is the pilings. And I spent quite some time trying to get into position for a shot, and I just couldn't pull it off. I'm struggling to get underneath the trees. I couldn't get the right angle. I ended up doing a fair bit of swearing and nothing came of it, I'm afraid. So I'm going to leave it there for this one. There are one or two images to show you at the end, which I hope you'll enjoy. But thank you ever so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, why not subscribe and join me next time. Cheers.